welcome to VIA's Support Raising Podcast. We're excited to bring you a special series that is pulled from recordings related to our Support Raising Leaders Conference in 2026. These are our workshop speakers and their expert level content, but we wanted to pull out some of the specific topics and speakers because their content applied to such a broader audience and we didn't want you to miss out. I'm your host today, Callie Davis, and I am part of the VIA Generosity team here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I am very excited to be joined by Tammy Doci. Tammy has served with Cru since 1992, starting with a very long stint in Albania, but more recently has been involved in coaching hundreds of missionaries, including me, which is super exciting. I was one of those people, and she is the Director of Communication and Content on Cru's National MPD team. Tammy, I am so excited to have you join us today, not just with your experience and your history, but your topic, coaching the shift from fear to faith. That just sounds exciting. So good morning, Tammy. Hello.
Yeah, good morning to you as well. It's great to be here with you.
Well, I'm excited to have this conversation with you, and mostly just wanted to start off being curious. This topic, shifting from fear to faith, is that something that you experienced, or maybe you've just seen a lot with people you coach?
Yeah, so the first part, just to tag on, is from insecurity to invitation. And I feel like that's really the key, is how do we move from our own insecurity and reaching out to others to invite them to partner to this place of invitation where we see it as this great invitation. But then the coaching piece for a lot of our coaches out there is this: how do we coach someone to move from fear to faith? Or this idea of, why me, from why me to why not partner? We can make it about ourselves. And so it's definitely something I've had to think about in my own MPD or support raising journey over the years. And I definitely think it's something that probably everyone who is involved in the process of raising support has to deal with, is what does it take to move them into that place where they step out in faith. So so it's definitely something I see in my own life at different key points, but also as I coach others. But I'm curious, Callie, just before I share kind of what shifted in my own heart, what was your shift, or what enabled you to become bolder in inviting others into the mission? About your support raising.
Well, I'll try and keep it slightly succinct, otherwise we'll be here all day. But so much of why I'm so passionate about support raising is because of the gift of perspective that I was given from my parents. So my parents were Cru staff. They raised support. It was their second career. So I actually remember them raising support. I was in middle school. And I remember experiencing life as a missionary kid, feeling like a normal kid. Feeling like we were just like any other family, that we tried to be wise with our money, but it's not that we were living out of missionary barrels. It's not that there was always the answer of we can't afford that. My parents, I always got the sense of, yes, we want to be very wise and good stewards, but we can go on a vacation. We can have a birthday party. So there was, I think they worked to communicate such a freedom in finances that was also overshadowed by wisdom, which I think was really beautiful. Yeah. So when it came to support raising, I just was deeply rooted in the reality that God provides. It's simply what he does. Yeah. And that is not what most people walk into support raising with, but that is why I got so deeply frustrated when I saw so many people struggling and organizations allowing them to struggle, allowing them to get burnt out. When I said, I know our God is bigger. Why does no one seem to care? Why does no one seem to see it's worthwhile to discover a God who provides? And that led me on my journey to a career around support raising. And I would say just my own insecurities. Just recently I'm near the tail end of a season of support raising, and it's still always the struggle of I believe in a great big God.
Hmm.
Does that mean something good is going to happen when I pick up the phone? That is always harder for me to believe.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to believe in the big picture, but when it comes down to the next name on my list, that is just always a moment of surrender of
Yeah.
I do not feel like it's going to go well, but I'm going to trust that it's my step of obedience to seek out where God has for me in my ministry.
Yeah.
So I know I've been blessed stepping into support raising with that gift of perspective, and it's something I want to fight for everyone to get a chance to see a
Hmm.
vision of potential in support raising instead of just struggle.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love all of that. I feel like we should shift this to an interview of you. No, but that's really, really significant, and I would
Mhm.
wholeheartedly agree with that aspect. And what a gift, for your
Mhm.
parents to
Oh
model
yeah.
that. And yeah, so many of us are shaped by kind of our background, whether
Mhm.
related to finances or just our view of money and possessions and wealth in general. And so, yeah, kind of tying into my story, I grew up more with a poverty or scarcity
Mhm.
mentality, just
Yeah.
part of my family upbringing. And so when I saw that the Lord was leading me to move to Albania and do a short time and then later full time serving in Albania for many years, as you said. That first season of raising support, I saw MPD as kind of a means to an end,
Mhm.
and I was just really afraid. I was afraid to invite college friends or my discipler. I was afraid to. I was fear of rejection was really key, and then also people pleasing, and so
Mhm.
mindset was really a barrier. At the same time, the Lord provided, through a lot of my parents' friends and just people who knew me from church. And so I got to the field, but again, that kind of lack of perspective of seeing of a healthy view of support raising really kind of accompanied me until 2013, 2014, when after spending 19 years in Albania, I moved back to the US and found myself in a really needing to raise additional support just with the change in the cost of living. And I'd been coaching others for a year. And so, I mean, already God was doing things in my heart, in my life, and my mindset as I began to step into the coach role, which I really loved because it was this aspect of development and just coming alongside our staff and just seeing how really support raising is a tool in God's hands to shape
Mhm.
us and form us. And so I was seeing that. But then I came up to 2014 and I had that significant amount of support to raise. And I remember thinking, how is this going to happen? I'd been away from the US for many years, didn't have
Mhm.
tons of new, connections, but there was a significant shift that happened. And there were some key things that made a difference. One was having a coach, like you said,
Mhm.
and even though I'd been coaching others, I still needed that for my own
Oh yeah.
MPD. I
Mhm.
still needed someone to just help me process and help me to kind of work through my crazy thoughts, and give feedback and encouragement. The other thing was, and this is, something I kind of feel like is key to every season of support raising is just to confirm my calling. I just wanted to reassess, did the Lord still have me serving with crew? And I saw that he did. He was, he had
Mhm.
provided a space to use my talents, my gifts. But then the third was what you shared about was this huge shift in perspective. And I will say the God ask was fundamental as part of that.
Mhm.
That was
Mhm.
really just the first half focusing on all about perspective. It was what I
Yeah.
needed to kind of wash over me. And then also the spirituality of fundraising by Nowen.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, that's a great one. We use that. We use both of those and others with our staff, and just really refreshing in our perspective. Um, but then, as part of the perspective shift, I
Mhm.
needed to hear that I was a laborer worthy of my wages. So, and my coach Kendra was one of those persons who just spoke that to me. And again, I knew
Mhm.
that because I was speaking it with others, but there was something about her saying it to me as I kind of wrestled with, kind of what you shared about your
Mhm.
family. Like, can we live above, not just in scarcity, but can we live in
Mhm.
contentment and abundance and
Yeah.
trust God's provision, and then I was really the ultimate idea there was that the gospel is worthy of his mission laborers being fully funded,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I needed to receive that, and that was really fundamental. The second one was kind of digging deeper into my belief system. I had seen God provide for the Shirkmans heading to Slovenia and the
Mhm.
Selways heading to Ohio University and others, a lot of different staff. But as I started this 8 weeks of MPD, the deeper question was, did he want to provide for me? You know,
Mm.
and
Ooh.
kind of uncovering that layer was
Mhm.
really the question was God good and did he love me? It's
Mhm.
sometimes we just kind of stick to the surface, instead
Mhm.
of peeling back the layers of the onion and getting to the deeper areas
Ooh.
of what is God, what is God, how does he see us? It's an identity
Mhm.
question, right? And then the third aspect, which for me is really made the difference in actually moving into
Mhm.
invitation, was this idea of embracing MPD as ministry, as part of my
Mhm.
ministry, and as a blessing to others, and again, I know the Kadask and Via and all of us talk about that, but it really makes such a difference because it frees us up to love others through this process of
Mhm.
support raising. And then it just became it kind of became more of an adventure of like, okay, God, you know whom you have on my team. Help me to step into just the initiating and the reaching out and the stepping out in
Mhm.
faith. And it doesn't mean that fear goes away. So I kind of feel like, coaching from
Yeah.
faith,
It doesn't go poof.
yeah, it doesn't just, disappear. Even today,
Yeah.
10 years later or
Mhm.
so, I still find that I have to take a step and really work with those internal belief
Mhm.
systems. And then this whole idea of this is a blessing. We have opportunity to invite others into the mission. And, God says in Philippians 4:17, one of my favorite verses about MPD as ministry,
Mhm.
that it's not, Paul invites the Philippians to give because it's a benefit to them. It's for their
Mhm.
blessing, it's eternal blessing. And so that just really helped me to lean more into a season of ministry to partners or to potential partners.
Mhm.
And so that was really crucial. But it's been a journey and it continues today, and
Mhm.
it doesn't really end,
Of
having to
course.
work
Yeah.
those spaces of identity and calling and our belief
Mhm.
system and lies. So.
Now, I'm a little curious. I know we're here to talk about coaching, but what do you see as work that someone can do on their own to kind of talk about these areas of calling and identity and perspective versus what really needs a coach to walk with them? Is there a way for someone to like assess that, or is it kind of across the board? Here's the line. What does that look like?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I think certainly there's exercises to think through calling and identity where, if you have just, even just digging into the word really,
Mhm.
but kind of going into the heart of what is our why. I think that's so key. And a coach, I think, can provide the feedback on how do we communicate that with others.
Mhm.
I think that's where the coach role steps in, as well as in helping us kind of move deeper into our belief system. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think we don't um, we don't really we're not able to just immediately think through what are our thoughts. Sometimes we need to verbally process with someone, and so
Mhm.
that's where a coach really can ask good questions and help us go deeper. And I know
Mhm.
Kathy Wilson, her seminar was excellent on helping others get unstuck with their limiting
Mhm.
beliefs. And I think that's where the coach role is so key is to kind of ask the questions that break down those layers and go deeper and kind of sift to the surface. Now the Holy Spirit can do that as well. And I think, when going back to 2014, it was part of my coach speaking truth to me, but then it was also processing with the Lord of those deeper lies that he needed to surface. And so yeah, I think both are really important. and play a part. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And maybe just to throw a little bit of a definition there, if you haven't experienced quality coaching, it is what takes a conversation around support raising from, well, how do you make a good phone call? What do you say in response when someone says this? And transports it to dealing with heart issues and will issues and belief issues. That is what I have seen trained coaching being able to do so much more than someone just having a helpful, encouraging conversation. And I love how that is definitely something you're teasing out, because I think that is so valuable, because that is where we get discouraged. That is where we lose motivation. That is where we can feel so uncertain. It's not just because the skills of support raising are new, but it is just all the internal things that we are working through and battling through. And I love that as Christians, we were not made to walk alone. We are made to walk in community, and that is true in support raising as well. And I think having a coaching relationship is really helpful in that same way of being able to speak truth over someone, being able to help them really dig deep in what is God doing in their heart, what is he drawing out, where are the sticking points that they haven't surrendered to him, so that they can move forward in what God has for them. It's just, I love it. It's amazing.
yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's where, I didn't know what it would look like to be a coach in the early days. And then when I realized, like, oh gosh, this touches on some of my giftings of shepherding and discipleship and mentoring others and encouragement and prayer and things like that, it just really, it just has been delightful, because I do think MPD and support raising is just one of the most refining times. I know in my own life, when I'm in seasons of support raising, it is one of complete dependence. It's one of the areas where just God brings me back to, I have to depend upon him, because certainly there's things I can step out in faith and do, but I really need God to show up and to meet me, especially in those places where it just gets hard, and
Yeah.
that's sometimes, not hearing back from people and the lack of communication, or just the challenge, just the ways we communicate today. And so, anyway, as a coach, it's really fun to be alongside others in that season as he's refining them, and we get to, like you said, we get to draw a lot of things out, and kind of be a guide and a shepherd and an encourager and a cheerleader with them, And so, and also the other aspect of community is, not just with a coach, but we also really, within our ministry with new staff, but also with our seasoned staff, we seek to provide ways for them to raise support together, or to be in it together in different pockets of time,
Yeah.
so that they're, because you're right, we do need that. We need to hear God's stories of what he's doing, and encouraging things. And so we really have found that that's really essential too. And it just makes a huge difference when you're with others in it. And so that's been really fun to do.
Wow. Well, I definitely want to get into like some hard practicals of what does a coach do in these three areas of calling, identity, and perspective. So, can you kind of give some I don't know, some things to hold on to, as far as, I don't know, maybe what types of questions, or maybe what approach? I don't know. You're the expert. I'm just here to learn.
No, you're with me. And I'm still learning myself, like I said. But yeah, two aspects of coaching, calling, two exercises we've used, and again, with new staff, but also with our seasoned veterans when they kind of re-enter their time of support raising, is really this whole idea of knowing your why. And we use kind of an activity called Why You, Why Crew, which is nice because it rhymes, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what ministry you serve with. But really, so much of today's thought is, how do you dig down into knowing why you're doing what you're doing, and we need to be able to go back and see that the Lord has clearly, led us to this place before we begin to invite others. And so, Nehemiah 1, 3, and 4, where Nehemiah is heartbroken over the exiles living in Jerusalem. They're living in disgrace. The wall and the gates are in ruins. And he says this. He says, "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept." This is verse 4. He said, "For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." And so we just see this kind of out of this place of heartbreak. Nehemiah moves into this great vision that the Lord places on his heart to rally the people and help them move and actually really make a huge invitational ask before the king. I mean, that's the big part of it, is we see his ask before a pagan king, and we see God really respond to Nehemiah's step of faith and his prayer. He's dependent on God in the moment. And so anyway, with Crew, we kind of say, why you? You know, what is the personal vision that God has given you to help fulfill the Great Commission? And we've got a lot of different ministries, and so we want our staff to be able to articulate what is it that they see how God has moved them to this place of joining staff full time and entering into this whole aspect of inviting others into the mission. The other part is, what is their vision for their specific ministry, or what their goals for their specific ministry? And so, you know, that's kind of just a basic calling exercise. With that, one that we've really kind of leaned into more recently is this idea of, what is your ministry snapshot? You know, and so if you are on a plane, you're flying, you know, to a conference, your next training, boot camp, you know, it's, if someone were to ask you, you know, what do you do with VIA? You know, it's having kind of just a ministry snapshot, like an elevator speech, so to speak, you know, to just to be able to say, you know, what they're really asking is, they don't want your day to day. They don't want, you know, tell me about your, you know, your daily calls, and, you know, all the behind the scenes. They want to know really the heart and the why of what you do. And then we like to end it with kind of, we train our staff to kind of think about a sometimes statement of that you could transition from your ministry snapshot to, hey, sometime perhaps we could get together and I could share more with you. Now, maybe it's a person on the plane. It's not going to happen that way, but you know, with a friend, an acquaintance, someone from your Bible study. And so like an example of that would be, you know, you would ask me, Tammy, what do you do with Crew? And, or, you know, yeah, well, what is your work? What are you involved in? I would say, I have this incredible privilege to come alongside new missionaries and seasoned missionaries to help them get to the field and to be able to be in front of people on the front lines, you know, sharing the gospel. Now, I would probably adapt it a little bit to make it less, you know, Christianese, I guess. But, you know, in recent weeks, we've seen, you know, hundreds of interns, you know, trained and equipped to be able to invite others into their ministry so that they can report on campuses this fall. And I love getting to see them move past this hurdle of support raising. And so I get to come alongside them and train and coach. You know, sometime, Callie, I'd love to share more with you about what that looks like. And, you know, maybe we can grab coffee and I can share with you ways you can partner with me, you know, something like that. You know, it's just off the cuff. I'm sorry, very rough, because I haven't practiced lately, but that is kind of an
Completely
example.
understand.
Yeah. So that's one idea in terms of the calling, and just kind of giving some exercises, but really helping staff be able to communicate, whether they're on the front lines, you know, or whether they're behind the scenes. A lot of our capacity and staff, we want them to be, you know, to know that what they're doing really makes a difference, and be able to communicate that to the people that they are sharing their ministry with.
Yeah.
So that is kind of the calling part.
Well, I'm wondering if I could throw maybe hopefully a small curveball, because I remember when I first stepped into ministry, it wasn't with this like burdensome calling that I saw other people step into ministry with. It was almost more of a why not? It was, I graduated with an art degree. I couldn't get a job, and there was just an opportunity to kind of go for a stint experience just for a few years. And it seemed like something that God was opening the door that I had the choice to say yes to. It wasn't this like there weren't the heavens opening up and this divine like singing and like, oh my word, the world is broken and I'm a part of fixing it. It was like, oh, that's cool. Sure, I'll go do that.
Yeah, that's great.
Is that harder to work through with someone? Because it's still a calling. There still was a need that I was a part of, but it definitely wasn't like this burden on my soul.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I do agree with, I think that's where a lot of people start, right? Is kind of
Mm.
that initial, I'm gonna, even we see that a lot of, out of college will join us for an internship for a year or two. So it doesn't mean they're looking to join for a lifetime. They don't
Mhm.
know what the next 5 years will bring. And so I think you're right. It's kind of like God can lead someone. I think it's more as you are raising support for a longer term of
Mm.
service.
Yeah.
I think one thing we'll chat about in our, whether on a coaching call or in our new staff workshops is this idea of what is your stake in the ground? What will
Mm.
help you? What is that biblical truth? What is your motivation? It might be like just a life change story. You remember someone that you discipled and you saw life change happen, and that's motivating for you to take this next step of faith.
Mhm.
And that's kind of your stake, whether that's for a year of serving
Mhm.
or 2 years. But it's kind of what you go back to think about when you're preparing to get in front of others, and it gives you
Mhm.
that confidence because you're like, gosh, I'm thinking of my dear friend Valmira, and how God worked in her life and brought about life change, and where God led her to serve today, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. You see her; she's flourishing as a teacher, and she shines for Christ. It's just, it can be anything, or it could be a
Mhm.
scripture. For some people, it's just could be the Great Commission. I'm just motivated by that call. And so I'm just going to take a year or 2 years or three,
Mhm.
and so I agree with you. It doesn't have to be, I think for some it is that they've prayed for many
Mhm.
years. My
Yeah.
husband just launched a new ministry, and he really did take about a year and a half or two to pray about it. But it was also tied into a need he saw in the world,
Mhm.
partly because it's related to his
Yeah.
family. So
Mm.
sometimes it's kind of born out of a combination of things. But I agree with you that sometimes it's that initial step, and then the Lord moves us, further along and
Mhm.
reveals, what He'll have next for us. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, so whether it's a stake in the ground or just kind of a nugget of, gosh, this is what motivates me.
Mhm.
It's important to have something I think that we cling to in
Yeah.
the process. Well, I was going to ask you, what has kept you? What was the
Mhm.
shift? Or, you know what I mean? So initially you kind of
Mhm.
were like, why not? I'm going to join. This sounds great. But what helped you, like, kind of, I mean, obviously you're still doing
Mhm.
it, and
Yeah.
now you're raising support for a long time. So what was it that kind of
Mhm.
moved you? Was there something that
Yeah.
point to
Well,
or
so when I first went overseas, it was to do nothing that is actually like focused on people raising support. It was actually just working at a boarding school.
Mm,
And then what shifted me into not even realizing it at the time, but stepping the first couple steps into a career in ministry was began to grow a burning passion for people to not see money as a barrier to
yeah.
ministry. And that came from seeing so many friends and families struggle and feeling like we were shortchanging the gospel in
Yeah,
the way that we lived and the way that we ministered.
that's good.
And so it's not what drew me to the mission field for those first couple of years. That it still really was looking back. It was just an opportunity I said yes to. It fit for then. It was a chance for a couple years overseas. And then God used that chance that I said yes to open more doors to show me that there was things that I did not anticipate that I would be passionate about, that I would want to make a difference in, and that changed the trajectory of my entire life.
Yes, yeah.
Hmm.
Now, and for me, as I've kind of, God had, really opened my heart to the world in college, and just gave me a vision for the nations and the great need for the gospel. And I think as I, after Albania and came back, what I realized was my heart was still for the nations and for missionaries to go. And I think about the passage in Matthew 9:36 through 38, where Jesus sees the crowds and they're lost and helpless, harassed,
Hmm.
like sheep without a shepherd. And he has this prayer request for the disciples. He says, ask the Lord of the harvest, to send out more laborers into his harvest fields. And so for me, it's like that is still his ongoing prayer request. Like I feel like it hasn't ended.
Yeah.
Um, the need is so great and vast. And so that's motivating for me in my role as a coach. I think about, okay, I get to help and I get to invite others to help as well. Those, the team of partners around me, I get to invite them into this space where together we're sending more, we're helping to answer that prayer, which until Jesus returns will continue because again, the needs of this world are just so great in so many different facets and aspects of our world. Just the need for the gospel continues. So for me, that keeps me motivated, and I again I see the Lord still keeping me here. And so
Yeah.
yeah, that's neat to hear what God did for you, and just again it kind of born out of your own experience too, and the good experience you had, but also then seeing the tough experience a lot of people have had because of limiting beliefs or mindsets or lack of perspective, right? And so
Yeah.
you see that struggle. But
Okay, so that's calling. How do you coach someone through identity then?
yeah, identity. So kind of there's two aspects, and I feel like Kathy's seminar went into that a lot of kind of limiting beliefs and what is our true identity. One thing we do, I'll reference, is kind of an exercise that is very interactive. So in a group setting, it's called the Lies Experience. And we do it with our new staff at kind of after they've been raising support for about 3 months. We have a refresh retreat where we really just take time to be in the Word and with each other and encourage each other. And there's some coaching as well, but we do the Lies Experience there at this retreat, and essentially it's on poster board at tables, just coming up, what are the lies that I believe about myself in this process? What are the lies I believe about others, our potential partners or just people that I'm reaching out to? What are the lies I believe about support raising as a whole? And then what are the lies I believe about God? And it's kind of it's a powerful experience because as we begin to kind of just, fill out those charts, again, as a table, there's comfort in knowing that we're not alone in some of those thoughts, and it's almost like if when you confess your sin, I mean, not, it's like there's healing when we bring things into the light, and there's, in the same way, it's very transformational to, in community, to kind of identify the lies that are rooted, and for me, it was, I'm not worthy, as a laborer, or God doesn't love me, right? So those are some of my lies. And so anyway, so they work around that and take time and process those things. And then of course, we got to replace it with truth. And so the second half of that interactive session is, what are the truths about me, as a laborer? What are the truths about MPD or support raising? What are the truths about God? And what are the truths about others? And so, and then later, at the retreat, when we do it as a retreat, we have a bonfire at night and we burn the lies and stuff. So
I love that.
yeah, it's always kind of a fun thing to do. But we've used it also with our veteran staff in some of our workshops that we do with them, like a day workshop or a half a day. And it is a powerful process to do that in community and just identify those things. So that's one aspect related to lies overall. Another aspect, this is more related to our identity as a missionary, based on James Clear wrote the book, Atomic Habits, excellent book.
Yeah.
Really love it just for how do you have good habits. And, I took this, as a coach to think about, okay, what does it look like to build a habit, but based on the identity we want to have. And so kind of relating to our partners. Now you could probably apply this in different ways, right? But as we think about our identity in habits, what are good, healthy MPD habits? Well, if we think of our state, like kind of what is an identity statement? Who do I want to be as I relate and connect to my partners, or how do I want them to know me, And so kind of the two-step, because James Clear argues that like identity-based habits are the most effective way to actually
Sure. Yeah.
step out into those things, And so I think it's kind of digging into what is true, what do I want to be true of me as a
Hmm.
missionary. So just kind of crafting an identity statement. So this is mine, as I'm the kind of missionary or mission worker who, is what do I want to be true? And so mine is I want to be a loving, intentional missionary that my partners look forward to hearing from and they love supporting and they know that I care for them and pray for them.
Hmm.
So that's really impacted kind of the way I view the things that I do, as I
Yeah.
think about a prayer letter, what do I want to communicate? As I think about just kind of cultivating and building relationship, not just from the very first appointment, but throughout. But it also impacts how I even view them or reach out to them as well.
Hmm.
So that's kind of a couple things related to identity.
Oh, that feels very powerful, I think, instead of looking at a to-do list of, well, I need to thank everyone so often, need to send a newsletter so often, and like your just list of to-dos, instead for starting with more of a principle, more of a value statement.
Yeah.
And then honestly, you have a lot of freedom for what that looks like, which I love because different people have different rhythms and different
Exactly.
practices and different ways they communicate really well. So you don't have to be stuck with one person's task as the way everyone should do something.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, instead you can say, "Hey, I want my partners to feel valued and
Hmm.
to feel that they are communicated with regularly." Okay, so what
Hmm.
does that look like this month? What does that
Yeah.
look like this week?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes it's just kind of helping our staff, think through
Mhm.
about, think through that, and think of value, those ideas and then how do you
Mhm.
prioritize it,
Mm, yeah.
along the way, or how do you, kind of keep it on your radar, as you
Mhm.
interact with different people or as you relate to your partners in different
Mhm.
seasons, So, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so now for the third one, perspective and just like how we view support raising. I mean, partly that feels like the biggest one, but I also feel like the first two, without them, you're not going
Yeah.
to move forward.
Right.
So, while this might be the most apparent felt need, it probably isn't the only need. But what do coaches do?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, kind of related to this MPD as ministry
Mhm.
idea, thinking about MPD as a form of discipleship, one of the most powerful platforms we get to have as we think about inviting people into the ministry, that it is a ministry to them, and,
Mhm.
I think about the different ways that we get to minister to them. It's, one is just really loving them. Um,
Mhm.
One of the ideas is loving them in the gap.
Mhm.
And, what is this gap that I refer to? Well, it's the one that we all know too well. And it can be one that is, 3 seconds, 5 minutes, 10 hours, 15 days. It's the gap between when we initiate with someone to invite
Mhm.
them, for to sit down and talk about our ministry and an appointment, and when we hear back from them. And so
Mm.
that gap in our world today is very interesting. It's challenging because our world is very noisy and communication has, in my perspective, has gotten more difficult in some
Yeah.
ways.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, and in that gap, there's all sorts of temptation to believe all the worst,
Mhm.
for people. Because sometimes it's a dear friend, and that we're reaching out to, and
Mhm.
we just don't understand that lack of responsiveness or that quiet,
Mhm.
ghosting is a familiar term. We're all
Mhm.
too familiar with it, and it can just be so hard. But I like to think about, okay, what does it look like to love someone in that gap? And
Ooh.
a lot of that has to do with my perspective. I begin to pray. I mean, I pray beforehand anyway, but it helps me pull back and say, God, how can I just believe the best? How can I pray for that
Mhm.
person and not? let my mind go to, things I don't know to be true, and there's this quote I love from a book, marriage book by John Eldridge that says about speculation. And it's a simple statement, but I feel like it applies in so many situations. He says, speculation is the playground of the enemy.
Ooh.
I kind of think of, if you remember back in the day, there were these merry-go-rounds. I don't know if they're on many playgrounds today, but you jump on that and you start going around and you're just so
Oh,
dizzy,
yeah.
you fall off, you stumble. And I feel like that's what happens in our own mindset is when we begin to speculate and kind of come up with, well, why aren't they responding? What do I think about that? Maybe they're angry at me. Maybe I've offended them. Our mind can go in all sorts of direction. And so, in Philippians 4:6-8 says, first, especially verse 8, where it says, whatever is true, and we don't know what is the reason for that
Yeah.
gap. And so, the Spirit enables us to really believe the best, to be praying for them, and then to give them grace in our communication as we, continue to lean in and be persistent in a gracious way, but really not jumping on that playground of that carousel, that merry-go-round of speculation is something that will help us stay grounded, and it will help us in our walk with the Lord, just really clinging to Him in that space, because it's a crazy maker. And again, that kind of can apply to a lot of different situations, but
Oh,
it's especially true in support raising. I don't know, Callie, for you, how that's been, when you are in that space, but how do you experience?
oh, it's all the things. Especially in a season of referral asking. It's people I've never met. So
Yes.
then I'm like, did I get the wrong phone number? Have I been leaving messages with a like complete stranger? Oh, it can be all the things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, what can a coach do to help someone struggling with a gap?
Yeah, so one of those areas, or one of kind of I guess my principles that I like to think about is how do we help those that we're inviting, and just in our own space of kind of extending grace, because this is what sets us apart as, from someone who's a telemarketer, a salesperson, and,
Yeah.
it is helping our staff, or helping those that we're inviting, actually, I should say, but get to know quickly. And so I really feel like people need the freedom to say no before they're freed up to say yes.
Mm,
And because saying no for many people is really difficult. I mean, not
yeah.
everybody. People are really good about, nope, they're more objective, or they're just able to not be as, but a lot of people, they don't want to say no. And so sometimes they don't know what to do with that invitation, because maybe they aren't in a place to really jump on your team yet. They might be already giving in lots of different directions and are overextended, or maybe there's just other circumstances right now that they're not able to really engage with you. And so I kind of like to think about, okay, how do I, as I interact with them, whether that's via text or via an email, or, through Facebook, or just calling, but it's like, how do I have a gracious posture that I can say, I'd really love for you I'd really love to sit down and spend some time and share what, where God has me and what we're involved in ministry wise, and give you a place, an opportunity to partner. At the same time, this might not be the right timing, or you may not be able to engage right now for whatever reason. And if that's totally okay, or maybe this doesn't align with where you're at, you have a different ministry vision. That's totally okay. Could you let me know either way?
Yeah.
And then, I understand we don't want to, we want to step into the hard part, of asking and giving them a space to respond, letting them be adults to say no. At the same time, I think it's helpful to just know that for us to free them up, that they can say no, and we will honor that. And even afterwards, I've had friends say no to me, and it's like, I love still just getting to love on them and be in relationship. It's not about, the Lord may not have those people on my team in that way financially. Maybe they're prayer partners, or maybe they're really not wanting, they're just not able to
Mhm.
engage. And I think it's a gift for us to be able to lean in and let them be
Mhm.
free to say no. And it's helpful for us too, because I know for you and me, we want that no more, quickly and not
Yes.
after 3 months of reaching out
Mhm.
and going back and forth. I feel like it's a gift on both ends.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and
So,
I think one thing, as I'm hearing your examples, it's definitely not going in with a posture of expecting someone to say no or like prepping them to say no, but
right.
it is, I guess, navigating the conversation when you see some hesitation, when you see some reluctance to respond, when you see whether it's because you're in that conversation with them and they seem to be struggling or because they're like avoiding you suddenly.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
how can you move forward as the asker to lend grace and to still invite them into this space of we're pursuing what God has for you and it's okay if it's not me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, you really summed it up well. Yeah, we don't want to kind of have like it's a no, and so I'm not going to ask, or,
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, we don't want that I mean, we believe in what we're doing, like we're excited for what God is, on the move doing, and we'd love for them to be a part of that. But we also understand if that's not where the Lord has them.
Yeah.
So it's really, again, it's a heart posture, I think, of
Mhm.
humility and graciousness. And yet also, that's why we say gracious persistent. It's also
Mhm.
we want to do our part in stepping out in faithfulness to the Lord, and that's, continuing to invite people and not knowing all whom he is, leading and nudging to be a part of what we're doing. And so it's we get to trust the Lord for that and see no as kind of this next opportunity. Who do I get
Mhm.
to invite next? Because I want to bless them as I relate what God is doing and share. So I think that's helpful, and I do think it's an aspect of ministry. To our partners or potential partners too, or to those who don't join with us. It's like, okay, Lord, I
Yeah.
don't know why they decided not to, or maybe you do, maybe they gave a reason, but it's like I got to pray for them, I got to bless them in ways that they may not know and they may not realize,
Yeah.
but we know,
Mhm.
and God, more importantly, God knows, and He is using our heart posture and our prayer and even the invitation in and of itself. It's trusting that He's using that in their lives. I'm reminded of a time, this was in that 2014 season, that a friend had given me some connections and referrals to her friends, and she had asked them first. She had
Mhm.
reached out to them, and it was really sweet to see the Lord use that in her life. She said it was
Yeah.
such a sweet opportunity to catch up with some of these friends as she asked them if I could invite them. And so, there were 4 or 5 people out of 10 that had said yes, Tammy could reach out to them. But one couple I remember that I reached out. We had a video appointment because we were in a different state, and they decided to not join my ministry, but they said,
Mhm.
really, you're reaching out to us. Realized we wanted to partner with this missionary couple that was at our
Mhm.
church and that was
Mhm.
getting ready to go to the field. And so they were really grateful that I'd met with them and shared with them because
Mhm.
God used that to see that, hey, there was this couple that they
Mhm.
wanted to get behind, that they knew personally. And so that was great. I mean, I was thankful, I was thankful
Yeah.
that the Lord used my
Mhm.
conversation for that purpose and for that other couple. So
Mhm.
we don't know how the Lord will use, our invitations
Mhm.
for others, to partner, and what ways he'll use that in their own lives, to consider. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I love that. I think that's a great sign when you notice how you respond when someone says no. That is such a great indicator of what is your underlying perspective of support raising. Because if it is all about the money, no's get really, really hard.
yeah.
Because each one of them is like almost a setback from your goal.
Right.
Versus if support raising is about connecting people to what God is doing,
Yeah.
then their no to you is a yes to something else God has for them. And so that
That's awesome.
all the responses people give you are positive.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we really have
Mhm,
to trust the Lord with, because again, we just don't know what he's doing in someone's life
mhm,
as we step out in faith. to invite them. And so,
Yeah.
but we can trust him that he is at work, that the Spirit goes before us. He's, working in their lives. He's working afterwards. And we want to give them a good taste of, you know, of God, and his goodness and his faithfulness and his provision. And, we don't want them to feel shame for having to say no if they need to, and I think, again, we get to be a part of that process of that. So.
Absolutely. Well, Tammy, do you have any final thoughts to leave with us today? Yeah, I feel like you've shared so many golden nuggets already.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's again, the coaching piece is really a privilege to come alongside others, and lots of just there's great coaching nuggets in God's Word and just in community. I think again, I think as coaches, again, looking at our own journey and helping just identifying our own steps, what shifted in our lives and what did God use is really helpful, and then helping to facilitate that with others that we are coaching and helping them really move into invitation. And, I was really challenged at the SRLC with the final keynote and the idea of MPD as one of God's tool to fulfill the Great Commission. I know I love talking about MPD as ministry. It's a big conviction for me and just a passion. But this kind of took it even further and just kind of refreshed me in that perspective. And so I've been thinking about that of, yeah, as support raisers go out and invite their friends and family and networks and community, that is part of fulfilling the Great Commission, because we're getting, one, they're hearing what God is doing, and they're being motivated and centered around God's redemptive work in the world. And so that's been encouraging and exciting for me to think about deeper. I feel like I still need to dwell on it, but I feel like it gives even a bigger vision of just the ministry part to partners. It gives kind of this greater, more glorious vision of what God is doing, and to think about all these mission workers around the world, because we're not just talking about here, but around the world as they mobilize the body of Christ, the global church, to get more involved in the Great Commission is super motivating. And so that's been really fun to kind of dwell on since our time together a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a big vision that I think, especially if we're in the thick of support raising or just some aspect of partnership development, we can kind of forget that God is doing something on the global scale, and partnership development plays a role in it. It's not just an avenue for how we get to do ministry. It's actually got this bigger divine purpose of God using it in so many people's lives to invite them into the work and the purposes that he is doing around the world.
Yeah,
That's pretty amazing.
it is. I agree. It's a great place to land, so it's so compelling to be a part of and
Absolutely.
to mobilize. So not just mobilizing missionaries to the field, it's mobilizing
Mobilizing the
partners,
church.
mobilizing the church to the field, and that's and everybody has a role. There's places for all of us to play a part in the ways God has wired us and uniquely gifted us. So that's really fun.
Absolutely. Well, Tammy, thank you so much for your time, for diving back into all this that you've developed for the workshop you presented. We are really blessed to have you join us not once, but now twice. And hopefully it has been an encouragement to listeners, as well as maybe some equipping and some tools to help people move forward a little bit more, a little bit better, a little bit more equipped. So hopefully it was helpful. So thank you, listeners. We hope you can come back and join us again sometime. All right, have a great day.